So, as I've mentioned before, equipping people with a decent sword to practice English backsword or Highland broadsword or British military swordsmanship or anything that requires a sort of single-handed basket hilt thing is not particularly easy. But I'm here with a bit of a sword review of a new product from an Australian company called Medieval Fight Club, which I think fits the bill really well for a good entry-level weapon. And I'm only doing this because I got one a little while ago, and I'm terribly excited about it, and I think it deserves a review and to be shown around. So here it is. So in my very limited collection of antique swords, I own a couple of 19th century British military swords. So I've got this one here, which is a straight blade, and this one here, which is ever so slightly curved. This one I've actually sharpened up, and I use that as one of my sharp cutting swords. So this is the Medieval Fight Club reproduction. And in the hand, I've got to say, this is a really, really good reproduction of a 19th century British military sword. If I compare it to my slightly curvy one, this is perhaps ever so slightly heavier. If I compare it to my straight one, this one is ever so slightly lighter, so it's a slap bang in the middle of my sample of two. But as far as swinging it around, it is a really, really good reproduction. The blade length is the same, and the blade profile is really, really nicely done. So it's got this nice thick edge, nice deep fullers, nice distal taper down to the thing there, and it's a really, really good reproduction of the blade as well. So the hilt, as you can see, is very pretty with lots of etchings and piercings and things, and is very, very, very nice. And the grip is also very well done, with a nice ferrule on the back of there, and in the hand feels very nice. Obviously it's not proper shark skin or whatever it is that they used on this, but it's just leather. But nonetheless, it's a very good reproduction. And the best thing about this is the price. It is extremely cheap. So basically you can get all the bits and pieces to put this together for about $150, I reckon. Now, that is the one thing to note, is that they don't sell the sword. They sell the bits and pieces that you then put together to make the sword. So what you actually buy is the blade. This is called the Trooper's Blade. You'll notice that it comes kind of pointy, so you're going to have to grind that off if you're going to use it for practical use. If it's going to hang on your costume as a bit of reenactment where you don't need to bother. And it is threaded with an 8mm, so an M8 thread tang at the end there. The grip and metal bits that go along with the grip come as a separate package. If you don't like that and you prefer a more traditional sort of medievally type grip, they also sell these rubber grips that will also fit on the blade in the same way. And of course you buy the hilt. Okay, so you can get this fancy bowl guard, and if you're right-handed, then that's a perfectly good choice. But there are alternatives, so if you're left-handed, like me, there is a symmetrical guard that you can get instead, which is one of these. So this is a symmetrical bowl guard that you can get on the Medieval Fight Club site, and it's really sort of a robust Hutton saber hilt. Okay, it is a nice big robust one, but if you're left-handed, then it covers the left-hand side of your knuckles better than the thing, even though it's not as pretty. There's no piercings or anything on that, so you'd have to decorate it yourself. So putting it together is really easy. So you'll notice that the blade does actually have a front and a back. It's not symmetrical, so it has a nice thick back edge along the top there, as you would do with the real thing. If you're going to use it as a fighting sword, I suggest that you mount it upside down, so you've got that thick edge taking the impact, and the thin edge, false edge up the top there, which doesn't get hit as much, will therefore last a little bit better. So you've got your grip with the little metal ring and the backing all just assembled there, holding it in my hand. I've got the sword, blade that way around, and I've got the grip. So all you do is really thread the whole thing together, and the only tricky bit is getting the end of the grip to sit between those two sections there. Okay, and once you get that tang all the way through, all you've got to do is tap it together. So I'm going to go and put this down and give it a gentle whack with a wooden mallet until the tang comes through. I'll be back in a sec. And here it is. That took all of about 30 seconds. So that's been tapped down, and you'll notice that quite a lot of tang is now sticking through there. So what I'm going to do is get my M8 nut and screw that down and tighten it, and then I'll get the angle grinder and I shall cut off the end of the tang that is sticking through and give that a quick run over with the sanding wheel to make it nice and smooth and non-burry, and then essentially it will be done. So that's nice and tight, so I'll just go and zap that off with the angle grinder. So that is cut off. While I've got the grinder out, I'm also going to do something about the very, very pointy tip and just ground that round. That'll take another couple of seconds. So I've sanded the tip off, so that's now nice and round. Obviously it will require a rubber blunt on the end, but you know, that's okay. And I've cut the tang off and smoothed that off as well. So in less than 10 minutes I have put all the bits together and I now have a really, really nice sword. So obviously as a reasonable price entry weapon, this is not sort of a high-end reproduction. So it is, for example, considerably shorter than perfect length for someone of my stature. So, you know, I could do with another 4 inches at least if I was going to use it for something like silver, for it to be of perfect length. But, you know, it's regulation length and that's really good enough. The guard is actually remarkably robust. I've been using this for a couple of months, and although the sword is very light, very fast and very wieldy, it is more than capable of taking on bigger, heavier blows swung with gusto, for example like this. So there you have it, the Medieval Fight Club Trooper's sword, made up from bits and pieces of their do-it-yourself sword section, as a affordable entry-level steel weapon for doing things like you know, any sort of British military swordsmanship or Highland broadsword or even silver. This is a really, really good entry-level weapon. The other thing just to note about it is that although it's not a full basket, this gives pretty good protection actually. I've been using this for a couple of months and haven't been hit on the hand yet. But you do also want to wear a little bit of extra protection under there, not just a glove. And the best thing to use are really not the sort of WMA lacrosse glove things that people tend to use for longsword, because they're just too bulky. You're actually better off with a cricket glove. So this is a typical cricket glove. What's nice about them is they have a plastic insert in the end of the thumb there, which protects the end of the thumb from getting hit. And also because they're designed to be squashed up close to the end of the bat, when you hold a hilt like this, your hand is nice and flush against the end of that, whereas the lacrosse gloves tend to have a lot of padding there and they get in the way, and I found them quite uncomfortable, whereas with this, that's a nice comfy grip. So actually I think the cricket gloves are probably better for holding this sort of thing than the lacrosse gloves. As far as the wrist goes, get a football sock, cut the end off, roll it up, and then you'll have a nice soft padding thing around the wrist, which will do for that should your van braces not cover that bit. So there it is. Really, really good sword, particularly for the price.
Now, as it turns out, I was wrong. You can actually buy the entire sword already made up with a scabbard and everything. So if you're not fussed about the customization or anything like that, you can just do that.
I should also point out that all prices quoted are in Australian dollars, and given the state of the Australian dollar at the moment, that means if you're not in Australia, these things should be really pretty freaking cheap, even with shipping. Unless, of course, you're in the UK after the whole Brexit debacle. I can't really help you with your currency anymore. And if you're in America, I suggest you buy them now before you elect Trump and the same thing happens to yours.